Respect Project talk. I am so happy to have these phenomenal women with us before tomorrow, which is International Women's Day, to talk about what they do, who they are, what motivates them, what inspires them. Robbie Brenner, who is the president of Mattel, Lisa Henson, who is the CEO of the Jim Henson Company, Scarlett Lewis, who's the founder of the Choose Love movement, Karima Ladhani, who's the CEO and founder of the Barakat Bundle, and Netta DeMeo, who is the founder and CEO of Return to Freedom. Everybody I know very well here, but I'm so excited to share them with you and talk about, not necessarily the perspective of being women in leadership, but people in leadership in our lives. And what does that look and feel like? And how do we sort of lean into fearlessness? And we've all talked a lot about, what we wanted to discuss today. But one of the questions that each of you loved the most is, what does fearlessness look like to you? And so, Scarlett, knowing your story so personally, I think it's apropos to talk about how your greatest strength comes from that very thing, that fearlessness that's led you to create a movement, really.
Absolutely. I think that after my personal tragedy that led me to being fearless, I realized that almost everything that I had ever done in my life was out of fear. Every relationship, everything I ever did for a living was out of fear. And then my 6-year-old son was murdered at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And, I realized that there was nothing left to fear. And I really dedicated my life sitting on the couch after that. I hardly ever sat down. And I just thought, I'm going to honor Jesse, to honor me, I'm going to live my life without fear. I'm going to choose love in everything that I do. And my life it was just completely different from then on. And I was so appreciative. Of course, we also found out that Jesse saved 9 of his classmates' lives before losing his own as well at 6 years old. So that was a huge motivator as well. Like, if Jesse can do that at 6 years old, well, then certainly I can live the rest of my life being fearless.
Will you tell everybody a little bit about that one moment that you're referring to when he helped those other kids get out of that classroom?
Yeah. So the former student whose mother had taught at the school returned to the elementary school, and he was going down the first grade hallway. He knew where he was. He'd gone there himself. And his principal and guidance counselor came out of a meeting that they were having with a parent on the right-hand side. He murdered them and then turned immediately left into Jesse's classroom and continued shooting, killing his first grade classroom teacher right behind him. And then his gun ran out of bullets. And so during the short delay while he was reloading, Jesse took the opportunity during that short delay to call to his friends to run. And it was during that time that they said that they ran because of his direction. And so he was able to save 9 lives. So in other words, in like a terrifying, chaotic moment, he was able to stand his ground and maintain access to his cognitive thinking, so really incredibly courageous. And definitely I use that example. I hope nobody's ever in that position. But I do know that we can have courage every day in our life to do the right thing, to live fearlessly, to live what our true purpose is, and not live the way that I was living.
I think it's really interesting what you're saying, Scarlett. I love you. You're just so beautiful. And you guys who is with us, please go to the chooselovemovement.org website and learn more about the work that Scarlett's doing. But it is interesting. I feel like I really relate a little bit to what you're saying. I mean, in a small way, in a very, very small way. I say this with total humility. When my mom died, I was so attached to a lot of narratives. I was still, I was still the wounded child, and I was still, I was just full of attachments. As much as I would have liked to have said I was detached to the results of things, which ultimately becomes a sticking point when you're so attached to how something should, the outcome should be. You're not free, you're not fearless, all those things that you're talking about. And losing my mom was a real gateway of change for me. I feel like each of you has always been strong and always been a leader, but I know that there are those big moments of pivotal change when you become a leader versus a follower, and you sort of carve out your path. I mean, Robbie, was there like a specific moment you can think back? I mean, you, I know, have always been this fierce, female, but I mean, was there a moment for you that became a pivotal, time in your life when you said, I'm a leader, I'm not a follower?
Well, first, Scarlett, I just want to acknowledge you and your story. I'm so moved by it, and Liz, of course, has shared your relationship with me, and I feel I can't even articulate it. Just hearing you sort of talk about it, like I feel it's hard to even just talk about what I feel fearless about, because I have children, and I can't even imagine what you experienced or what you went through or what that's like to live with something like that. So I just want to say, my God, like, you're so beautiful, and that's just, your story is it just really, it touches me so deeply. So thank you for sharing that, and I'm surrounding you with love and strength, and you have so much strength.
Thank you, Robbie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that in terms of becoming a leader, I don't know. I think you just have to, like, assume the position. There are things in your life that you do that you do them because you have no choice. You have to do them. And I think all of the things that I've been truly passionate about in my life, whether it was making the Dallas Buyers Club, which was really a 20-year journey for me. I never gave up on it because I believed in that movie when nobody else did, and I just pushed it up and up the hill. And when the rock, rolled back on me every single day, and people told me, you're crazy to make a movie about a guy that's contracted HIV, like, nobody cares, nobody wants to see that movie. I just, continued on. And I think it's just, you have to have true conviction in what it is that you're, what you're doing and what you're passionate about. And when you do find that truth and it's real, then I think you really, really can achieve anything. So I always say to people, find authentically what it is that, like, drives you, or the things that you want to do. Tell the stories that you want to tell. Whether you're a storyteller, do the things that you want to do, because if you're not living in that truth for anything you do in your life, you're not going to be able to, I don't want to say be successful, but it's going to be hard to sort of, find your path. So I would say for me, it's just, yeah, living in that truth, and not allowing anybody to sway me or
Yeah.
tell me differently.
I love this quote by Maya Angelou. She says, success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. And you've actually done a respect talk with me before and talked about the authenticity of self-care and really recognizing, who you are and cultivating that, protecting it, and that sort of being your guiding light. And that's why I wanted to bring all of you together, because part of what your passions are so actually completely different. Netta DeMeo, you have created Return to Freedom. I mean, I have this vision of you like this, with a sword, out there fighting for the horses. And I mean, you've dedicated your life to it, but it's, again, much like everybody here, not the first time. It certainly won't be the last time that you have a passion and you put everything you have into that. But, you've talked a lot about the X factor of your personal alchemy of what makes you brave. And we've had that conversation privately before. I mean, what does it feel and look like to run Return to Freedom? And, what is that X factor you tap into to be fearless in doing what you do?
Well, first of all, thank you for having this forum and these beautiful women. I'm touched. I'm moved by everybody I've heard so far. And um, first of all, I don't think you go out and look to be a leader unless you're a politician. At least for me, it wasn't like that. It's just going to what Robbie just said. It's, if I had all the money in the world and money wasn't an issue, what would I do with the rest of my life? And these moments come after great tragedy often. I've had, when I was about five years old or so, I saw wild horses being chased on television and captured. And as a 5-year-old, I knew and I recognized that they're sentient beings and they're suffering and they have feelings and emotions. And I remember at that moment screaming at my mom and saying, I'm going to travel the world and tell the truth, and I'm going to create a place for these animals. And so years later, fast forward to that was the 60s, fast forward to the 90s, and the Associated Press was exposing all these issues, the corruption within the Bureau of Land Management, who manages our wild horses on our federal lands, and the suffering and them going to slaughter, and just the entire way that 50 years of mismanagement has resulted in great suffering. And I couldn't not do it. It's just, so I looked at what was being done and what wasn't being done, and wanted to see where I could add value. And it was really the moment that happened where I knew I was going to move from working in Los Angeles in the film and fashion industry to dedicating my life to this, was acknowledging a pause that needed to happen. Like I remember the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer, when he's looking at the board and his mentor is saying, don't make a move until you see it. And I did that. I stayed in my sister's flat in LA, and I just said, I'm not moving out of here till I see it. And everywhere I looked at that time, for some reason, hard copy, everywhere they were exposing incredible injustice to animals, and from wildlife to canned hunts to the horses. And I thought, what do I want to do with the rest of my time here? Because I did go through a series of car accidents that led me to a moment of going, I could die tomorrow. What am I going to do with the rest of my time? So if I had all the money I needed, because I didn't have a trust fund, I didn't know how I was going to do this. I just said, all right, this is what I want to do with the rest of my time here. And it was really a point where I had to look at what wasn't happening and where can I fill a necessary niche. And I certainly didn't think I'd be a leader or anything like that. But when you're looking at a solution that needs to happen, or solutions, and you don't have the answers, that takes you on a journey. So that inquiry is not only self-reflective, obviously you grow along the way, but you find yourself sometimes in a position where you're pioneering new innovative methods of management, of humane management for the horses, because I manage a wild horse sanctuary as well. And also looking at the politics that surround it. So we're looking at how do we change national policy, and then also at the same time creating a sanctuary, which is a great way to educate the public for change, and also apply innovative management tools to make 50 years of government policy shift and change away from capture and removal, let's say, for example, specifically, to on-range management solutions where the horses can remain in their family bands, and to bring awareness to Americans that we have wild horses in America and how wonderful. And what niche do they fill with biodiversity? Also, what is the American Mustang? Emotionally, physically, and their place in the ecosystem today in a changing world. So it's been a very exciting journey. But you find yourself out there sometimes, and there's moments that are really humbling, and you're scared. You don't have the answers, but you don't let your fear define you. So you rely on a place growing. I don't know. I think it's been a great journey for just coming back to accepting the pause, accepting the anger, and letting the anger help you get clarity. And then you find another place to make choices.
Mm-hmm. I love this quote that Ayn Rand said. She said, the question isn't who's going to let me, it's who's going to stop me.
Yeah, yeah.
You have a vision, like Robbie said, and she's pushing a boulder up a hill and, nothing is going to stop her. That's a very deep internal commitment that you make to yourself. We all know that we fail and we get back up and we fail again and we get back up. And that fearlessness is a big component of being successful or being a leader. But it's a spiritual commitment and journey to ourselves to not give up on ourselves and to create a narrative that has meaning, man's search for meaning, to have purpose and to make an impact. Lisa, we've talked so much about everything and you've given me some of the best advice in my life. And I'm just curious, just quite simply, just from your vantage point, what does fearlessness look like to you? What does it mean to you? Knowing so much about your own childhood and sort of how you were impacted and sort of the leadership position you have. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you for whoever just reminded me to unmute. Thank you very much. That was very helpful. You know what? Right now, the face of fearlessness for me is Scarlett Lewis. I'm so touched. It's incredible. But as Netta was also saying, I think that if you have a very strong awareness of mortality, that can be very helpful in terms of leadership and priorities. In addition to having several people in my family die young, I also suffered since childhood from panic and anxiety disorder. So when I was a kid, I was afraid of everything. Like, didn't want to jump in the pool, didn't want to play I couldn't hit a ball in gym. I was hiding in the closets. Like, I was literally afraid of everything. And then later, when I actually realized what the anxiety was, the chemical nature of it, and what the triggers were, I realized actually the only thing in the world that I'm afraid of is death and people dying. So, and even if I have studied Buddhism and have attempted to embrace spirituality in my life, I'm still afraid of dying and I'm still afraid of people around me dying. But nothing else scares me. Like, nothing at all scares me other than that. So, when I'm in a business conversation or we're talking, whether it is about money or career or education with my children or anything, like, I have no fear about anything like that. So sometimes that has helped me in business and in leadership because I'm never afraid of the failure of a project or the failure to get a credit for what I'm doing, or if something will make more or less money. Like, there's just no fear around any of that. And so in a funny way, even though it started as a kind of a crippling element when I was a child, it's become a very strengthening element for me as an adult. Just that more sense of mortality.
Yeah, I that's sort of what I was referencing when I responded to Scarlett, which is that when mom died, I became fearless, and it was in the losing her. It was in the becoming aware of the fact that every day of our lives, we're preparing for death in a sense. Like, this is the greatest expression is this moment, because there's no guarantee that the next moment is going to be 20 years from now. It could be much like, you, Scarlett. My mother had a sudden, unfortunate death, and so becoming aware of that then becomes very empowering, at least for me, facing that mortality. How do you inspire others in your position, Karima? I know you created Barakat Bundle from the perspective that, if not you, then who was going to help deal with infant mortality in poor countries and so forth. But you were inspired to do something you saw that other people weren't doing, but now you're leading something quite big. So how do you inspire others to sort of fulfill your destiny, your work that you're doing?
Well, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here in this space with so many other leaders who happen to be women. And I'm very eager to share my story and to learn from the stories that all of you have been sharing here. For me, fearlessness and leadership and all of these things are really rooted in injustice, in identifying injustice. And I think I heard that as a constant theme in many of the stories that were shared, someone dying before their time, horses who can't defend themselves, stories of people who suffered from HIV, sharing those stories and highlighting injustice. And so for me, that injustice, actually, my first experience with it with regards to Barakat bundle was purely a statistic. It was coming across the statistic that 80% of maternal and infant deaths are completely preventable. This idea that the world has already solved many of these causes of mortality, and yet women and children continue to die from these causes. How can we live in a world where that is the case? And that statistic ended up being amplified as I was drawn to learn more about it by experiences in rural India, where I remember being in a village and a grandmother came up to me. She knew we were asking people about their experiences with child rearing, and she held her hand to her knee and she said, "We don't stop worrying about them until they're this tall." And then it was amplified further a few years after that when I lost my cousin, who was more like my big sister, to childbirth in Canada. So this isn't a challenge of developing countries. It is a worldwide challenge. We've seen it amongst the maternal mortality crisis in the US, particularly amongst Black women. And that injustice that was once a statistic and now has a face for me is what continues to drive me and fuel me. And I see that injustice amongst driving every other woman here. And so when that is what's driving you, when it's more than profit or your own personal success, it's very hard to give that up, whether you want to or not, whether you're tired, you have other things pulling at you, because that fire is not something you're lighting for yourself. It just exists. And that's what keeps you pushing that boulder up. So for me, it is a question of, if I don't work to right this injustice, maybe I'm not the best positioned. Maybe I don't have the most money. Maybe I don't have the most education. Maybe I'm not the most well-connected. But if not me, then who? And worst case, I stop and the injustice persists. Best case, I resolve it. Somewhere in the middle, most likely case, is that I've made an effort to move us somewhere from that injustice closer towards justice. And so for me, that's what continues to inspire me. That's what continues to move me, that I'm moving forward slowly, but also knowing that there's so many others who, as you said, may be inspired by what I'm doing. I continue to be inspired by them. And that collective force, I think, helps us all push that boulder up the hill a little further. So I find that to be particularly inspiring, motivating, and I think it's a mutual relationship of us inspiring others and them inspiring us. And that symbiosis is what creates progress, I think.
I see Scarlett just nodding her head, and it's really so interesting because I know, again, like that fire, those guiding principles for each of us is very different. But there's something connected between what you're saying and also what Scarlett has built. So Scarlett, I mean, talk about the Choose Love movement and the guiding principles of that fire, and what is that, and how do you explain that to others, and how do you inspire them from your leadership position of having created this movement? What's the intention? What is that fire you try to spread and teach others through the movement?
Well, it's exactly what Karima was saying. It works from injustice. Our kids and our educators should be safe at schools. And in fact, every school shooting is 100% preventable. We know how to do it. We know that hurt people. And it's always a case of somebody having fallen through the cracks. It absolutely was, with laws being broken and everything in our case. And and I have to admit, before that, there had been school shootings, and I just thought, what can I do? I'm just one person, and then I'm a single mom, and so, I don't see what I can do. And then, of course, my child died, and I woke up and I realized that we are all responsible for what goes on in our world. And actually, one person can make a tremendous difference. And I started doing some research and found that we have pandemic levels of bullying. Despite billions of dollars we spend in anti-bullying, we have pandemic and continuing increasing levels of suicide. And the suicides are getting younger and younger every year, but we have more than ever before. And this is despite suicide prevention that we spend billions of dollars on. We have more deaths from drug overdoses than ever before in the history of mankind. And that is despite the fact that we spend billions of dollars on substance abuse awareness programs that every child has to go through. We have mental illness that is skyrocketing in our country. We have over 50% of our US youth that will have had a diagnosable mental illness by the time they're 18. The majority of that diagnosis is anxiety, Lisa, which you're familiar with. And we know the average onset age for anxiety is 6 years old. And 70% of the kids won't get professional help. So if you look at the long-term outcomes of untreated anxiety, they are exactly what we are seeing in our homes. That translates into our schools and our communities, everything. And all of this can be prevented in school with something called social and emotional character development. And there are decades of research behind it. It's there. It's just not being used. There have been efforts for decades, but they haven't been efficient. And when I went into my son's school and I said, my gosh, there's something called, social and emotional learning, and this would have saved my son's life. What happened? And they said, oh yeah, well, we spent so much money on that program that we couldn't afford to train the teachers. So we had to send a small contingent out, and they were supposed to come back and train the trainer. And that never happened. So the program never got out of the box. So I turned around and I said, okay, I'm going to have to create the best of the best program that will get out of the box. And our kids deserve it. Our kids are entitled to these essential life skills because we know that these are the life skills that they need to reduce and even prevent the majority of the suffering that they're going through. It's incredible. So within the last 4 years, our program's now in over 10,000 schools in every state and 112 countries, and it's no cost because this cannot be priced out of the market for anyone. It was priced out of the market for my son, but it would have saved my son's life. It would have saved the life of the shooter, and it would reduce and prevent so much suffering. So that is what my life's purpose is. I found my purpose, and actually I found it. I was given a little bit of direction by my son when I came home following his murder and the tragedy at Sandy Hook. I found a message that he had left on our kitchen chalkboard. He had written 3 words: nurturing, healing, love. And I knew immediately that if Adam Lanza, who was, I probably shouldn't say his name, except that I really want people to understand that these aren't monsters. These are human beings, and they're in pain. So if he had been able to give and receive nurturing, healing love, the tragedy would never have happened. It was as simple as that. Simple isn't always easy. And so that became my purpose in life, to make sure that every child and then every individual has the ability to give and receive love. And it was just too easy to blame Adam and his mother who gave him the guns. Everybody was blaming them after the tragedy. And I thought, wow, if it was really all their fault, it would never have happened before, and it would never happen again. But wait a minute, this is our new normal in America. We know that we have on average 1 school-related shooting per week. And so it is our responsibility. And I had to learn that the hard way, and I did. But it is our responsibility to make sure that our kids are safe in schools.
Well, the nurturing, healing, love are your guiding principles. Mm-hmm. You've also done that with yourself. You've nurtured and healed and loved yourself. You've healed and those broken pieces. I love this this thought, which is it's the cracks where the light comes in. It's those are the entry points. That's when we become wise, and that's when we we become these leaders that we're talking about. It's through the pain. And so through healing something inside of us, we then become stronger. And I'm just curious, Lisa, what is it distinctly? Can you pinpoint it? If you can't, it doesn't matter, we'll move on. But it's just a thought, what is it specifically that you had to heal inside of yourself in order to be, the woman that you are? I can say for myself, what that is, scarcity or being in a struggle all the time, and fixing that inside myself is that what became an opening for me to have more success. But what is it in you that you had to particularly heal in order to become this most empowered version of yourself that I've known for the last, 15 years? Your microphone.
There you go. Yes, see, it's just going to be the pattern of the whole thing is not me not unmuting myself. Actually, we've known each other a little bit longer than that. Oh no, maybe about 15 years. The whole idea for me was that childhood, that childhood anxiety. I also was run over by a car, so I had some trauma as well. And I think, in chat, there have been people talking about trauma and pain and physical safety. And so like, if you feel like you're physically not safe and you feel like you're just like under some kind of attack that's not real, and your body is fighting off this unreal attack. So for me, just dealing with having a diagnosis of anxiety and panic disorder and having medication, and just being able to place that where it belongs, which was a lot of it was not real. And then embarking on more interesting kind of meditative and spiritual studies. I made a shift in my early 30s from just like, I just want to survive and thrive and do well in school and be recognized and be important and all that outside stuff, to having much more inner confidence and the ability to also to listen, because when you quiet down these negative voices in your head, you can actually listen to other people and you can hear what they have to say. And that is because we haven't talked that much about leadership of groups and people, but it's very hard to listen to other people. And I was never good at it. But once I started attempting to listen to people, I became a better, leader as per leading other people.
Yeah, well, what I'm hearing ultimately is that, and the Respect Project is based in this. This is the foundation of doing these, which is come and tell the truth on behalf of other people. So as leaders, you're talking about, your truth being your guiding, your North Star. You lead from that entry point, and hopefully you inspire others from that narrative of your life experience. So I'm glad you brought up the whole leadership thing, because that is sort of what this is about, is women in leadership positions. And Robbie, what is that sort of North Star? How do you inspire people, being the president of a company and, running a film studio? How, you have so many people who admire you, and what is, what do you want to give them? What's that like golden nugget? If you could just say, I'm out, but I know I gave you something very special that could be your North Star, something that will protect you.
Well, just a few things. I just wanted to say something from just to Scarlett, what you were saying before. I completely agree with everything you were saying. And Lisa, I do think we're at a really dangerous time in the world just with all of the social media, and that's a whole conversation in itself. But I think having children, and some of us have children, being able to really connect with our children and give them the nurturing and the love and the attention, and making sure that we're not, doing this all day long and distracted. There's so many distractions in the world. People don't look at each other and talk to each other anymore. And I think that's a huge problem. And I think it's a problem in leadership and in just finding your voice, finding who you are, feeling like you're enough, feeling heard, all of these things that I think we're at a very dangerous place. My daughter said to me the other day, and she's a beautiful, really special girl, and she said, I just feel like I'm average. I feel like I see all these girls and I'm so average. And I was like, honey, you are so far from average. You are amazing. You have a voice. Like, this is what you have. All you have is what is inside of you, is your authenticity, is what makes you who you are, that nobody can take that away from you. And that is what drives me, are the things that I know that I have to do, the stories that I have to tell. That is my authentic truth. And I just try to harness that and tell people when they want to be filmmakers or producers, or kind of follow the path that I've went through, that you gotta keep your head down, you gotta do the work, and you have to live your truth and walk in your authenticity. And if you do that, then I believe that, you can kind of manifest anything. And so that is what I tell people, like, tune out the noise and tell the stories that you want to tell, and do the things that you want to do, and just be humble, and you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. And yeah.
Lisa said she doesn't fear things but death. Do you consider yourself to be fearless, Robbie? Does nothing make you afraid?
Oh gosh. Well, I think there are things that make everybody afraid. I think that's part of being human. But no, I mean, I think that in life you just have to kind of dare to fail. You have to take the risks. If you're not going to take risks in your life, you're never going to succeed. And so I just try to take very bold steps and surround myself with bold people and inspiring people. And I try to walk in, positive light as much as I possibly can, even when things feel not good. And that's something you do really, really well, Liz, and you inspire me all the time to be a better person, and to walk in my truth, and to not forget those things. It's easy to do that when things don't feel like they're going well, but sure, I'm fearless. I mean, I'm sure I'm not fearless. I mean, I feel like I'm fearless. I feel like in my work, I throw myself into it, and I make these stories and I will them into existence, and they tell me no, no, no. And I say yes, 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 because as we're all saying, we don't have a choice. My choice is, this is what I'm here for, is to be a storyteller and a creator. And I don't have a choice other than to do these things. But in my life, certainly I'm fearless. I have children. I'm afraid when they go around the block sometimes. I mean, that's part of it.
I just have a vision of you at 12 years old, being just this force of nature, fearless in every way. Eleanor Roosevelt said, well-behaved women rarely make history. I think each and every one of you is so wild, and just so wildly strong and bold and visionaries. It's fascinating for me to spend time with you and just get a sense of what is that secret sauce that makes you you? What gets you up in the morning? What gets you going? What's your passion? Netta, I'm just curious, what is your motto? I mean, do you have something that you live by that's just, like Robbie just said, she encapsulated it so beautifully. Do you have a motto that motivates you, that gets you up in the morning? Like, I wake up and I throw open the door and I say, whether it's true or not, I say, welcome to another day in paradise. And it's a joke, but at least I'm challenging myself to demand that this day becomes like that. And I fall short all the time, but at least I'm stating it. I'm willing it into being.
Right now, what gets me up is my new puppy, new rescue. That's what gets me up. But I think God, I love what everybody's saying, because we're all, we all experience the same kinds of emotions and realizations and things. And I think for me, it's not being afraid to change my position or my conversation mid-sentence. And when I'm with a horse, I can do that, because you're working with body language. So I'm fall into a zone where I'm willing to shift my weight or do whatever. The moment I sense that they're afraid, I can do certain things. So that's helped me to understand, why can't I do that with my staff? Why can't I do that with my partner? Why can't I do that in my life? And it's been a real, it's a wonderful challenge just to be willing to shift, my conversation or shift my position or my opinion or how I'm talking to someone. You know, going to the I wanted to talk about inspiration too. That really moved me because I found that, yes, along the way, there's so many challenges, and to be bold, sometimes you have to make bold choices, you know, especially when you're dealing with a national issue to do with national resources, natural resources, and the way we all share things on the planet. And you're having to deal with people that just you don't agree with on any issue, you know. Um, and yet you have to find some sort of coalescing. And all, you know, on a global level, there's serious issues that we're facing with the environment, and the horses are kind of the canary in the coal mine in that they're out there on these vast areas, and we don't realize like we're next. You know, water, soil, you know, climate change, all of it. And so I've been in a position where I've had to sit at the table and listen to people that just I completely don't agree with, and try to find that place where we can find non-lethal, you know, humane management and compromise. And so what's exciting to me is you get humbled, but I'm amazed at with social media today, the backlash you get from people, it can be numbing. And so a lot of the fear of having a voice and fear of coming out in a bold position to keep your eye on the end game, the long game, is challenging because everyone's driven by emotion, especially on social media. So it's been really challenging. And one of my biggest fears is just like everybody, you know, having people not agree with you, not like you, whatever, you know, and that is something that you have to put aside, and you just stay true to, you know, the long game and where you're trying to get to. And that's been a real challenge along the way, and trying to be aware and keep my ears open and my eyes open for new voices or old voices, old methods, old solutions that just haven't had a voice, and elevating other people. And I think that's been a real gift, just turning my fear about me. You know, what are people going to think of me? What if I say that? Oh my God, oh my God. But taking myself out of it. And then also being open to elevate others has been a wonderful way to help the organization grow, you know, and that's been a gift.
I'm glad you said that because, you know, with International Women's Day tomorrow, I just want to acknowledge there are a lot of women here listening to each of you, us, and saying, Anna said, tomorrow is International Women's Day. What a wonderful way to remind us of our potential to be leaders, to follow our path. As each of you speak, your authenticity is projected as truth. And for those of us who struggle with finding our purpose or who jump from one purpose to another, what would be the first step to refine the purpose? So I guess Anna's saying, you know, how could you help her become more specific as opposed to jumping from one thing to the next? Each of you is so committed, single, you know, with laser focus on what you do. Anyway, she's just acknowledging you all and saying you're so inspirational. And I think with International Women's Day happening tomorrow, I do want to acknowledge that I think women in general lift each other up and need to do that more so. I'm curious, when you look at younger women, younger girls, I mean, do you take into deep consideration how to be inspirational to them so that they continue the work that each of us has done and broken through glass ceilings, so to speak, and so forth? I'm not a big feminist, but I will acknowledge that we have all had to assert ourselves in a very male-dominated world. So I'm just curious, and any one of you feel free to jump in, but do you think of how we can continue to lift them up because they're going to continue the work that we've done?
Absolutely, all consciously, because when the kids come up to the sanctuary, which is the educational platform, even though we have a lobbyist and we do a lot of national work, that is where people can have their own experience and develop their own voice. And we had a young boy one time after he saw video of captures of roundups, and he said it's like having to go to prison for something that you didn't do, and that really resonated with me. That was a potent thing. But all the time, you know, you're looking for. I say a 6-year-old started Return to Freedom because you know when you're a child and you're always looking to nourish and inspire the next generation. And for us at RTF, it's an exciting time. We're onboarding some new staff, and a lot of them are a lot younger. And that's really exciting to me, to hear. I want to hear their opinions. And I'm in a place now in my life at 61 years old where, I've enjoyed an incredible time with a journey. And I really now want them to have their journey. And I'm here to support that. That's how I feel.
Karima, who inspires you the most?
Well, for me, I think there's so many women in my life who've inspired me. But at this point, when I think of who inspires me the most, it's the women I've met in rural India who are tying their sari from one side of a rafter in their roof to another to make a cradle for their baby, who don't have enough to eat for themselves, but are committed to trying to breastfeed their child because they know the nutrients that can give their child. The women who aren't empowered to necessarily make decisions or have autonomy over their own health or even that of their child, but continue to fight. So that's kind of an ambiguous answer, but I think that the spirit that a lot of those women show is actually the same spirit we see in mothers all around the world. And I see it in my friends who are having babies and telling me, I was inspired by what you did before, but now that I've had a child, I have a whole new sense of respect for women who don't have that village around them. So to me, it's those kinds of women that inspire me. And if I might add to the conversation that was being had before, I think, we say we live in a male-dominated world, and that's because so many men hold positions of authority. But in our society, we often conflate this idea of leadership and authority. People who are in positions of authority are not necessarily leaders, and leaders do not necessarily need to be in positions of authority. So when I see young women, I don't necessarily think that they need to break a glass ceiling and have a title like founder and CEO to be a leader. That's not what makes a leader. To me, being a leader is demonstrating respect. And by that, I mean having the humility to know that there are opportunities to learn all around you. So tying back to another thread, the question that I ask myself when I wake up is, what can I learn today? Because if my whole goal is to make an impact and continue to give out and give of myself, then I also need to recharge those batteries. And if I'm not necessarily the one with the most money, the most education, the biggest network, all of those things, then I need to be constantly on the search for where I can get more to recharge my batteries. And so with all of that in mind, the question I ask is, what can I learn today? Knowing that you can be a leader without being in a position of authority, and having the humility to know that no matter what your position of authority may be, there are people all around you who you can learn from, which I think Netta touched on very nicely, regardless of age, regardless of geography, regardless of education. And so being open to what the universe can give you as you are trying to give back to the universe, I think those are some things that inspire me, that create leaders, and that the next generation will continue to build on.
I love that you made that distinction, that leadership does not necessarily go hand in hand with authority. And I do think women have a very different way of feeling and being and communicating. And I'm fascinated with female leaders in general because we lead from a very different narrative. Lisa, I'm just curious. I mean, running a studio and having, so many people, sort of revere you. I hate to say it, but you're a legend. And, and I think that people really, look to you with such admiration. How do you, what leadership skills can you teach people that work with you and for you?
Wow, that's a big question. I feel like also I'm not really a legend. I'm the daughter of a legend. So I'm very driven by legacy and sort of almost not a very typical American ideal of sort of filial duty to the family and to my father and keeping the family business thriving, as well as doing great work for kids around the world. And, we have our mission, but also it's never really been about me, since I came to work at the company. I was already 40. I already had been working as a studio executive. And then I went to my family company. And when I went there, it became, as I said, not about me, but about this sort of bigger mission of both entertaining, but also educating and uplifting kids and families through entertainment. And I forgot the other part of the question, but in terms of leading, I just try to focus on what other people in the company are doing more than me, and as much as possible share the credit and the success with everybody as much as I can, and I've always been a behind the camera person and don't really know how to be the front person. So I think even though I have a bossy personality and I talk a lot, my actual nature is a little bit like to retire behind what we're doing and let the work speak for itself and for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the question I was really thinking is, do you have a deep sense of responsibility to others? Meaning, in the position that you are in, running the company and so forth, do you have a sense of responsibility to inspire, not just to lead, but to really kind of try to help and guide, because there are so many people that work for you and look up to you. I wonder sometimes, people who achieve a great level of success, if they have a deep sense of responsibility to others. Karima, you were talking about injustice inspiring you. I think I'm inspired by feeling responsible to others. I think of others a lot, and I think the idea behind the Respect Project was to create conversations and narratives that were honest, because we all do suffer in silence. We all do have a locked place inside of our hearts that that we try to navigate and try to be empowered by, but oftentimes we only have one friend we can really tell the complete truth to. And if we could collectively tell the truth on behalf of each other, then we're sort of offering our life experience as commodity, as healing. We're giving that up and we're saying, this is what I've been through. I hope it helps you, and I would just assume that people who achieve a certain level of leadership that we think of, how to give of ourselves in that way to each other, because we go through so many difficult things in our life, and for what? We go through it hopefully to give it away, give it all away, like that great quote, use me until you use me up. So that was the intention of the question. I didn't mean to to make it so, but I love and admire you so much. So I was thinking from that perspective of like, because you've inspired me to make good decisions in my life. And I would think, running a company, there's so many people who probably would think, well, what does Lisa think? What should I do?
Well, in your case, my whole thinking was that if you want to make films and you're a woman, you should direct.
Yes.
And if you want to make television series and you're a woman, you should be the showrunner. And these are the ideas that are now commonplace, and everybody does think that way. But when I entered the entertainment business in the 80s, the women were encouraged to be more the producers or the behind the scenes or the helpers. And so, I am so excited about all the women who are making the choice on the film side to direct and on the television series side to showrun, because you've got to, if you want it to be your show or your movie, you have to take the lead. And that was my advice for you.
Yeah, it was. I mean, and and Robbie too gave me that advice. By the way, Robbie, somebody here said that you were a force at 12 years old. So Courtney's in the house, and she confirmed what I knew to be.
I love it. She was a force with me.
Maya said a question to Lisa or Robbie, in the entertainment industry, what is your greatest challenge in bringing positive change in such a media-driven, negative culture? Either of you want to take that question?
I mean, I just try to tell great stories. I mean, I think that, I work at Mattel, even though, I've made many independent movies that have been meaningful and provocative. And that I'm very proud of. Now I'm working at a company that, has this treasure trove of all these brands, that people have a personal relationship, whether it's Barbie or Hot Wheels or Bob the Builder or 8 Ball. And the way that I've sort of approached, telling these stories is just, let's find the best voice. Let's find the most authentic voice to tell this story. Let's tell it in a way that it feels commercial, but at the same time, it's sticky. And because there are so many distractions in the world in terms of what we were talking about before with social media and gaming and, kids just doing all these other things. How can we sort of, inspire them, do something that's entertaining, but at the same time, it's indelible and it feels like it's different and it's authentic. I think when I think movies like Into the Spider-Verse, which was such a brilliant film, took something and really turned it on its side, and it was entertaining, but it was very provocative and it was very emotional. And so I think just finding ways to kind of break out and do things differently is something that I aspire to do and am trying to do in my work.
There's a question for everybody. How did 2020 and the changes that we've endured ultimately, how have they affected your mission or changed your perspective? Anybody want to comment on that?
I can say that our experience has been that crisis exacerbates inequity. So when there are times of crisis, there's less time, less money, less energy to devote to the ongoing, the chronic crises that a lot of us are trying to solve. And I see Scarlett nodding, so I imagine you face this same challenge. In our case, maternal and infant mortality is higher. It will continue to be higher. Access to healthcare is harder. And the challenges that are posed in providing healthcare to people who need them are greater. And so it means that our work is more necessary than ever, but it also means that our work is harder than ever. And so for me, that just means that the injustice has grown. And so it just means that the work is more necessary.
I like that. I just want to ask you guys just a question in general. I mean, I think being powerful women as you are, what is the first thing you really manifested, when you started to understand harnessing, that ability inside of yourselves? Did any one of you have a moment when you realized, that you're the ultimate manifester in your life, and that if you had a vision that you could, Scarlett, that you could make it come to be? Do you have any sort of instinct on that?
When was the time
that you first manifested and you really saw that you have that ability?
I guess when I didn't see it in the world, when it wasn't happening in the world. And I realized if I don't do it, I'm going to have to wait for somebody else to do it. And so it needed to be done. Somebody had to do it. And our kids, were desperate. They still are. That was a great question. The changes in 2020, because we had this social distancing mandate, and that's the exact opposite of what we need as healthy, well-adjusted human beings. We need each other to survive and to thrive. And then so comes in this social distancing mandate, and so and including resources, as Karima was talking about, it also was really, really difficult and continues to be difficult and will continue to be difficult for our children, who a lot of whom were home and socially distanced, and isolated and lonely. We had a loneliness epidemic going into the pandemic, and now it's on its head. And so, it just makes, as Karima said, everything that we do even more valuable.
Yeah, and I want to acknowledge that Nancy here said the pandemic really brought emotional wellness to the surface, removing the stigma of it. And that conversation, has gotten much, much louder. Voices have amplified that we suffer, and that it's a conversation that we can have. And somebody's saying that they love all the work that you're doing. My daughter has been suffering a lot during this time. She has been, very isolated like all the other kids, but she's been taking it particularly hard. So I just want to acknowledge the work that you're doing, Scarlett, and what Nancy said, which is, that the pandemic has been extremely difficult, and hopefully has changed our perspective on a lot of things, but mental health is definitely one of them. We've become a lot more comfortable talking about the difficult things. So as we move out of the pandemic, I hope that's something we continue to do and that we continue to be comfortable with discussing. You guys, listen, I always promise this is only an hour of your time. I love each of you so much and am so grateful that you would come and give me a little bit of your time. I admire each of you, and I know that it's been inspiring for others to hear from you. There's a last quote I want to read, which is Michelle Obama said, "So here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, and may we raise them." And so here we go. Let's move forward. Have a beautiful day. And thank you so much for joining the Respect Project. The next talk is going to be March 21st with the Special Olympics on resilience. And we invite you to that. And I love you, Robbie, Lisa, Karima, Scarlett, Netta. Thank you for your time.
Love you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Everybody.
Bye, everybody.